Hello, and welcome to the 201 training session. Today, we're going to be covering the NOAA integration, patient and physician correspondence, inventory, recalls, and finally returns. Let's go ahead and start with the NOAA integration. Blueprint offers an integration with the NOAA audiological software program, wherein you can transmit patient files from Blueprint to NOAA, and then, from there, transfer the audio files back over to Blueprint. In order to export a patient file over from Blueprint to NOAA, all you need to do is select a patient file, hold down the NOAA menu in the top left-hand corner, and then pick the Export Patient to NOAA option. You'll get a notification saying the patient has been exported. And if we go ahead and open up our NOAA software and search up by that patient name, we can see that their patient file has been exported over to NOAA. Let's go ahead and enter in a test audiogram so that I can show you how to export it back to Blueprint. All right, so then we'll go ahead and fill out some basic audiological data, maybe some speech data to go along with that as well. And lastly, some temp data to finish it off. All right, once your audiogram has been saved to the patient file in NOAA, you can export it to Blueprint by right-clicking on the audiogram and selecting Web Export. We'll get a pop-up notifying us that the action is sending, and if it's sent successfully, it'll give us an action sent message like this one. If I navigate back to my Blueprint system and go into the patient's audiology tab, I can see that that audiogram has been submitted successfully. If I right-click on the audiogram under the History menu, I can edit all of the information that was transferred over from the graph by selecting Edit. In addition to adjusting any audiological data on here, we can also select the severity of the hearing loss, as well as the type and shape. We can also edit the device that was used, the entry date of the test, the provider who undertook the test, and add any ICD codes as well. The full list of ICD codes can be found in the Setup menu. So if I save this, those ICD codes should be added. If I needed to add additional ICD codes to that list, I would just need to go to my Setup menu, Electronic Billing, and then ICD codes, where I can edit or add new ones to that list. Navigating back to the patient file, you can also see that there are a couple options we have. You can see down here that we have a patient types option in the bottom left. If I click on that, we'll get a list of types of hearing loss that we can use to categorize the patient. Anything that we select here will show up in the patient summary screen. These are also useful for marketing campaigns if you wish to market to certain patients based on their type of hearing loss. If you're curious about how to utilize these and other patient groupings into marketing campaigns, I would recommend watching the marketing tutorial video on our website at blueprintsolutions.us. Going back to our NOAA audiogram here, let's go ahead and get this information into a format that can be emailed or faxed to an outside provider. In order to do that, we'll simply right-click on our audiogram again and select one of the audiological report formats that'll come with your Blueprint system. Let's go ahead and pick our hearing assessment with dual audiograms report here. As you can see, this report, as the same as all other Blueprint reports, will automatically populate the patient demographic information in the top section here. We can also see that the data from our test has gone over to this report as well. However, if we do need to edit any of this, we can do so. This form, as well as all other Blueprint standard forms, will be fully editable. If there are any comments or recommendations that we need to add to the report, we can do so from here as well. And once we're satisfied with the content of our message, we can see here we have some buttons at the bottom here that we can use to save this form to Blueprint or email or fax it out as correspondence. You can see here we have the first option to email or fax the report, archive it to the patient file directly within Blueprint, or to download it to our computer. If you have a signature pad or tablet integrated with Blueprint, you can select the digital signature option and select the sign on signature pad or sign on tablet option, which will then populate in the signature section. If we want to, we can email or fax this out as is. However, if we'd like to make some changes to the form before we do so, we could choose to archive it to the Patient Documents tab to save for later. Let's go ahead and do that now. So I'll go ahead and select the archive option here. I'll be prompted to allow the form for future editing or to lock the form to prevent future editing after I archive it. Let's say yes, we do want to allow future editing. We'll be prompted to select a title. That's fine. Categorizing it, we're going to be sending this to an outside physician, so we'll say it's physician correspondence. You can add an optional description of what the document is, and lastly, its current status. We haven't done anything with this, so we'll say it's to be emailed. At the bottom here, we'll also get an option to display it in audiology. Checking this will automatically link it to the test in the patient audiology tab. So we'll hit save and get a notification saying the document has been successfully archived. All right, this will now be saved in two places on the patient file. If I refresh their audiology tab here with the test, I can see that the report has been linked to the audiogram itself. If I want to go ahead and preview the document, I can confirm that the changes I made, test and comments, and test and recommendations are present. And another place where I can find that is now in the Patient Documents tab. Here I can see my hearing assessment with dual audiograms. And from here, if I need to, I could select the View option and continue to make changes until I'm satisfied with the report. All right. And once I've finished with the report, making any changes I need to, I can go ahead and right-click on the document and finally email it out to that outside physician. In order to email, I can just highlight it and select Email Fax or right-click on it. If I select the Email Other option, I'll get a list of email recipients that we have in Blueprint. You'll notice that each one has a different icon next to them. So the medical cross here next to Dr. Sam P. Adams indicates that they're an out-of-clinic provider. The mail icon next to this advertiser is just a generic miscellaneous recipient email, so it could be a manufacturer or just a random email. And the Blueprint symbol indicates another Blueprint user. All right, let's go ahead and send this out to Dr. Sam Adams. I'll go ahead and highlight their name and select next. And we can see that doing so is going to automatically populate the to and email address fields. The subject can be fully editable. We'll stick with hearing assessment dual audiograms. You might want to add the patient name in there as well. We can adjust the body of the email from here as well. We can also choose to preview our document. You can see it's been attached automatically to the email, but if we want to make sure everything looks good before we hit the send button, we can just select the show preview panel option. And once we're satisfied, we can go ahead and hit the send option. And once we get the message sent icon, we can hit OK. And then update our document by selecting change status from to be emailed to sent or emailed. Unfortunately, Blueprint does not have an email outbox or inbox. So if you want to check the status of your sent emails, you'll need to navigate to your user's personal email address and check the inbox from that program. If we want to fax this document instead of emailing it, we can simply highlight the document and select email/fax, and this time hit the fax other option. Similar to the email recipient list, the fax recipient list will tell us what type of recipient it is based on the icon next to them. However, this will only be true for out-of-clinic providers. They'll still have that medical cross symbol. Every other email type will just appear blank like this. I should say blank with no icon. Let's go ahead and send this back to Dr. Sam Adams' office. Go ahead and select them and hit next. We could, if we wanted to, adjust the subject and the body similar to our email, but we'll leave that alone for now. We'll also assume that the attachment hasn't changed since we sent out the email, so we don't need to preview it. We can hit next here, and different from emails, it'll actually be prompted to select a fax cover page. We could choose to include no fax cover page, but for now, let's go ahead and stick with our generic Blueprint fax cover page. Our signatory is going to populate to our current user by default. I'll stick with that. We'll hit the preview fax icon, and that's going to give us our fax as it would appear to a recipient before we send it. Once we're satisfied with our fax, we can go ahead and send fax. We'll get a notification saying the fax has been queued for transmission. I can hit OK here. And if I'm curious to see that fax's status, I can actually check on that by going to the Communications tab in the left-hand corner here, and then checking on my fax outbox. Here I can see all of the faxes that have been queued for transmission, as well as their current status. I can see all of these will have a yellow caution symbol next to them. The reason for that is because these faxes failed to send for some reason. The reason being in this case is that the fax number that was sent out is a false fax number, so there is just no place for that fax to go. Faxes that, if I wanted to change that number, I could always try retrying the transmission by right-clicking and selecting Retry Transmission. From here, I could adjust the recipient's name and fax number. And if that were to be queued successfully, I would get a fax icon instead of a caution icon, and faxes that have been queued and successfully sent will have no icon next to them, just the sent date. Switching gears from correspondence and audiograms, we're going to now navigate to the inventory function. To access the Blueprint System's inventory, we're going to pull down the inventory menu in the upper left-hand corner, excuse me, and select Manage Inventory. Selecting the All filter on the left will display all stock items across both locations. Something to note that your inventory can only record hearing aids and orderable items. Orderable items being things that aren't hearing aids, but you still need to order from the manufacturer. Things like batteries and other accessories that your clinic might have on hand will not be able to be recorded in the Blueprint inventory. When we select one of our inventory items, we can see the history of each item in the bottom here, as well as its current status on the right. If you right-click on an aid that's been loaned to a patient here, we can also see the patient details, as well as populate a loaner agreement if we need to. Going back to our inventory screen, at the top we have a quick find button, which we can use to find an aid based on its model name, serial number, or the patient name that it's been loaned out to. We can also search aids by their current status. And we can also use the demos only and hide demos buttons to separate aids that are not for resale from our normal stock. Let's go ahead and add some hearing aids to our stock. The process of ordering hearing aids for your stock is actually very similar to ordering hearing aids for a patient. Similar to ordering hearing aids for a patient, we'll need to put in a manufacturer order. In order to do that, we're going to want to pull down the inventory menu here in the top left and select the order stock option. From here, we'll need to select an order date and the manufacturer we're ordering from. Selecting the manufacturer will automatically pull up all of the model names for that manufacturer. If we know what we're looking for, we can just simply type it in, it being the model name. Once we have it, we can go ahead and hit OK. And from there, select the quantity, battery type if we know it, and we can also choose to adjust the manufacturer cost before we send in the order. Similar to patient orders, color and notes fields are optional, so we'll leave those blank until we actually receive the items. And if we wanted to receive additional model types from this manufacturer, all we would need to do is click on the next row in the model column, and that'll give us our hearing aid model list again. All right. Once we're satisfied, we can go ahead and hit save. That's going to generate a manufacturer form. We'll go ahead and skip that. And if we're curious on how to receive that stock order, once the items have come to our clinic, we can go back to our manage inventory screen and switch our view from inventory in the top left here to stock orders. In order to receive the stock order, we can right click on it and we'll get the option to receive stock or receive stock with a manufacturer bill. Additionally, we can also choose to close or delete the purchase order if we made a mistake or if we want to cancel the order. Let's go ahead and receive the stock with a manufacturer bill. Before we can do that, however, we'll need to select the quantity that we're receiving. In most cases, this should be the same as the quantity that we ordered. So we'll put that in. We ordered 2 of these, we received 2. We ordered 1 of these, and we're receiving 1. You can hit enter and next. And this will take us to the manufacturer invoice section. We'll want to enter the serial. First, we'll want to enter the invoice of the item from the manufacturer, the serial numbers of the items, we can adjust the battery type if we need to, the cost we received it at from the manufacturer in case it's different from what we thought it would be, add sales tax to it as well, select the cutoff for the return date to the manufacturer, as well as enter any color or notes that we need to add since receiving the item from the manufacturer. Additionally, you'll notice that there is a not for resale column. If you'll recall, we had certain aids that were marked as demo back in our inventory. If we check one of these items off as demos, or not for resale, excuse me, they will appear as demos in our inventory. At the bottom here, we can also enter additional expense items that might have appeared on the invoice. The most common one is probably going to be shipping and handling, so we'll select the expense account miscellaneous, the description for what the expense is for, and enter the cost of that expense. Once we're satisfied, we can go ahead and hit save. Something to note, while we can enter any expenses from the invoice such as this that we have received from the manufacturer, if you aren't integrated with QuickBooks, the system will only record these transactions as cost of goods sold or purchase price for each of these items. If you wanted to see these additional expense costs or look up the invoice number from the manufacturer, you would need to have a QuickBooks integration or reach out to us in a support ticket. We can now hit save and view those items in the inventory by looking them up by serial number. Moving on from our inventory function, let's navigate to the blue sales tag on our toolbar on the left-hand side here. This will be our recalls list. Recalls are a great way to keep track of tasks that your staff need to complete. For example, as you can see right here, we have a bunch of patients who have loaned hearing aids due. You can see on the left here, we have the date that the loaned aid was due on, as well as the staff member that it was assigned to, in this case, Sonia, and in this one, Stephen. You can add new recalls by selecting the Add Recall button in the bottom left-hand corner. Let's say that there's a patient that we need to call back in order to schedule a follow-up appointment. In order to add them to the recalls list, we'll select the Add Recall button in the bottom left-hand corner here. We'll stick with our TestQuick 33 patient we've been working with and hit OK. We'll be prompted to select a recall date or when the task needs to be completed. We'll say this Friday. We can enter the recall type then. We have a callback recall, so that's what we'll make it. The assignee or the person at our clinic who's going to be responsible for completing it, we'll stick with ourselves. And the recall status, we'll say in progress, since nothing's been done, but the recall is currently open. Before we hit create, we also have a notes section where we can add additional information and a required button. Now this is a way to determine, this is a great way to separate which recalls are urgent and require action and which recalls are not quite as much of a priority. In this case, scheduling appointments or items that are due back to the clinic, they're probably going to be a priority. So we'll want to go ahead and select the required button. And making this required, I'll go ahead and hit create, is going to add it to our action required list right here under the recall period filter. We can also access that filter by clicking on the number inside of the red box, again located next to the blue recall sales tag. Clicking on that is going to give us all recalls that are required and that are within 7 days of the due date. So if we're curious, we can find the recall that we just entered right here. Since it's within 7 days of that Friday that we had it due on, it'll appear in our action required recalls list. All right, if we're curious about how to clear a recall from this list, once the task has been completed, all we need to do is right click on it and select complete/cancel. All right, and all we need to do now in order to complete it is select an outcome for the recall. We could say we called the patient and the appointment has been booked or completed. We call the client and the client has canceled future appointments, or something else has happened requiring the recall to be removed from the list. Let's go ahead and select appointment booked/completed. And in our notes section, we could also say what happens. We could say appointment booked for 02/15 or some other date. Once I hit update, that's going to remove it from our recalls list. And if we're curious about the status of our completed recalls, or if we just want to view them, we'll have to navigate back to the patient file here that it was for and go to their marketing tab. We can see all completed and current recalls in the patient recall section of the marketing tab, and we can differentiate completed recalls from current recalls based on whether the date in the recall date section is bolded or if it's faded like these two callbacks, which have been completed. All right. Before we end the training session today, we're going to cover returns. So I'll navigate back to our TestQuick 33 section and go to their hearing aids tab. Now, this patient has quite a few hearing aids. So we might want to return some of these. In order to return any of these items, all we need to do is select the item, right-click, and return to either the manufacturer or return it to our clinic stock. Returning to the manufacturer is going to remove the item from the system completely, whereas returning it to stock is just going to put it back on that inventory screen we covered earlier. We can also go to the patient's sales history and return the items from here as well. We just need to find the sale associated with the aid we want to return. Right-click, and we'll get those same options to return to manufacturer or return to stock. Let's go ahead and return this Anthem XT Platinum model here. So I'll right-click and select Return Items. We'll return to Manufacturer, and this will take us to the Return Item screen. We'll pick a location for our return and the return date. And once we're satisfied with those, we'll need to pick a reason for our return. Picking a reason isn't going to impact the returns process. It's just what's going to show up on the return credit page. For this, we could just say no perceived benefit or aid malfunctioning. And we can see then that the price of the aid is the same as that we ordered it. However, we can see that the credit that we're going to get for the return under this return total section, and indeed at the bottom in this patient credit section, is only $950. This is a problem since if we go back to the patient sales history here, there's an open balance of $1,000. The patient hasn't paid for this item. And if we return the items, the credit generated from the return is only going to be $950. So we have a couple of solutions here. We could either remove this digital return charge in order to get the credit to the same amount as the subtotal of the item, or we could just leave this charge here, return the items, and then bill the patient for whatever return charge we put in there at a later date. It's just important to note, however, that returns will always generate a credit, and those credits can then be used in either refunds or to close out the original amount. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and remove that $50 return charge so that the patient return credit is the same as the subtotal. I'll hit return items. A return credit form will be generated. A return transaction will generate as well. And then we can see here that the original sale has closed out because of this return transaction. If we're curious to see how that all worked, we can right-click on the sale and go to its transaction history. And we can see that $1,000 of that return credit transaction we just processed has been applied to this sale for $1,000, thus closing it out. So in cases like that where there's an open balance, a return credit generated for that sale will automatically apply to the sale. But what about in cases where the patient has already paid for an item? If we try to process a return for this item, then we can see the patient has already paid for it, the sale is closed out. So we'll return it to manufacturer. We'll say we're using it in an exchange for the same manufacturer and the same style. Get rid of the return charge. And just like the last return, you should get a return credit that's equal to the subtotal of the item. However, if I return the items now, I'll get an option to issue a refund. The reason why the system is asking me this is because the sale is already closed out. There's already a credit equivalent to the original sale amount, being the patient payment, that's been applied to it. Now what we're doing is we're generating an additional $1,030 credit from the return. So the system is asking, what do we want to use that additional credit we're using for, since it can't apply to the sale that, again, has already been closed out. So we can choose to use it in a refund. However, in this case, I'm going to want to use it in an exchange for a different aid model. So I'm going to pick no here. And we can see that the sale and the payment has remained applied to the sale. And we now have this $1,030 return credit that we can use. We have an open balance on this sale right here. We'll say it's the one that we're exchanging this original aid for. So instead of charging the patient this additional $1,030, all we need to do is take this return credit here and apply it to this open invoice here. And that'll now show as paid from that return credit here. This concludes the intermediate training session. If anybody has any questions, I would refer them to the help pull-down menu in the top left-hand corner of their blueprint, where they can access the user guide and other video tutorials such as this one. Thank you so much, and I hope you all have a great day.